This is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners in cooperation with Prophecy DeFi. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the DeFi Decoded podcast. I'm Alex Tapscott here with Andrew Young. We've spoken a lot about the future of blockchain infrastructure and the discussion between different layer ones, Ethereum, Solana, and others. And in that discussion, we've also talked about a project called Cosmos. In fact, we've had some guests on the show from within that community, people like Sunny Agarwal, Ethan Buckman, and others. I think a lot of people look at blockchains as these platforms, you build applications on top of them. And if the block space or the state sort of gets filled up, then you build a new blockchain and maybe it does something a little bit better, faster, cheaper. But ultimately, the idea is that applications get built on top of these things, value accrues to the platform. Cosmos has a very different vision, which we're going to hear a lot about today. Basically, this idea that applications should sort of be masters of their own destiny, like developers should have their own chains. And the idea of an app chain connected through a central hub is like a fundamentally different kind of architecture. And it's one that's been catching on. Andrew, you remember we talked about dYdX recently, announcing that they were basically moving from Ethereum into the Cosmos ecosystem for that exact reason. And our thesis, I think, on the show is that we're going to see more and more like that over the coming months and years. And this is a thesis, I think, that is going to be a big part of how 2023 plays out. Now, within the Cosmos ecosystem, there is a token, ATOM, which I think people associate very strongly with Cosmos. If anything, they think of it as like the ETH to Cosmos. But in fact, it's a little bit different. The architecture, as we've described, is not exactly the same as how Ethereum works. And recently, the Cosmos ecosystems just released this new report, this new white paper announcing an evolution of ATOM. It's called the ATOM 2.0 white paper, which I think is trying to reframe how ATOM fits into the whole Cosmos ecosystem. We don't know exactly how, but we're going to hear about it because very fortunately today, we've got Sam Hart, who's the strategy lead of the Cosmos Hub at the Interchain Foundation. And he also wrote the ATOM 2.0 white paper. So he's kind of like the guy for this kind of thing. And so we're going to hear a lot about what ATOM 2.0 is, how Cosmos, or what the future of Cosmos looks like, and all this good stuff. So Sam, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, terrific. So why don't you tell us a little bit about just your background to get started? How did you get into all this stuff, and how did you end up landing sort of in the Cosmos universe? We're already really interested in hearing those stories.
Yeah, I studied biophysics in college, like chemical physics. I was doing protein folding research and moved to New York, started doing kind of big data genomics. So, high throughput sequencing. This was right around when Occupy Wall Street was happening. So that really shaped my kind of lens on the institutional infrastructure of New York and the US and the world. And I just ended up getting involved with some projects that kind of came out of some of that, milieu in New York, the platform cooperativism movement, for instance. And yeah, so I was doing a bunch of kind of side projects that really became full-blown projects. I wrote a number of white papers that in the kind of 2017 era, some of them became, really interesting, successful projects, and encountered Cosmos through some of these efforts.
Mm-hmm.
I was
when
offered.
Was that? When was that exactly?
This is right around, right after Ethereum launched, basically like 2016, 2017 is when I was starting some of that work, and then it was kind of a backdrop to, I continued to do that. I was offered a job in Berlin. That's how I ended up here. And I use that as a kind of opportunity to make a break from my scientific research.
Interesting. So combination of your science background and an interest in like what social and political and economic injustice pretty much in the world, or some sort of analysis of power structures led you into the blockchain space?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was actually working with a whole bunch of artists that were doing like investigations into this. And I mean, if you were just in New York at the time, it was like you couldn't not be aware of Occupy and like that there was a kind of palpable tension that really, focused a lot of minds on the institutional structures that that were kind of prevalent in the city.
Yeah, terrific. And so why, like, how is it that you ended up in the Cosmos world versus say like one of the other blockchain part communities? Because I think like a lot of the, evolution after Bitcoin was in large part in response to, the failure of existing systems and this desire to try and improve them, and maybe building, decentralized solutions was maybe not only a more resilient and inclusive, but maybe a more sustainable way to do that, right? We've talked to people who are part of like the regen world, who see this technology as something that can help solve global problems. So like, why Cosmos?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned I had a little bit of exposure to it as I was doing consulting work with a number of different projects. And basically what happened was I had moved to Berlin. This global pandemic was impending. One of my closest friends, Billy Rennekamp, who's in the other room over here, was part of Cosmos. This is right after the Tendermint Inc. kind of melted down a little bit. And so he was kind of tasked with rebuilding the Interchain Foundation and really kind of piecing together the Cosmos ecosystem again.
Yeah.
So I was kind of recruited. I figured that not being a freelancer during a global pandemic was probably the smart move. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We've come a long way since Billy and I started.
Yeah. So tell me, like, how are you spending your time these days, Sam? Like, and then maybe we can talk a bit about the Atom 2.0 paper that you were lead author on. I think everyone's quite interested in hearing that. Yeah.
So when I started at Interchain, the task was just ship IBC, which is the communication protocol that's kind of undergirds the Cosmos network, and get some developer activity going in the ecosystem, just kind of jumpstart the Cosmos project. And we did that. It took about 9 months from when we started, and basically once we got to what we felt was some degree of kind of self-sustaining activity within the ecosystem, so that there's kind of more things coming in, and we don't really need to regulate it or micromanage. The priority kind of shifted to the Cosmos Hub. And so for the last 6-9 months, I've been solely focused on the Cosmos Hub. It was always kind of part of the conversation, but the kind of original framing of the Cosmos Hub, if you go back to the Cosmos white paper, which was published in 2017, that kind of describes like a hypothetical scenario where there's a hub in this perspective network, and its role is to kind of coordinate or help other chains. But it was very kind of it was more of a postulation, and so we were really waiting until IBC was activated to kind of take a more firm positioning on what the Cosmos Hub should be doing in the network.
And so I think one of the big criticisms of Cosmos and Cosmos Hub, and something that we've talked a lot about on the podcast, is Cosmos is this sort of incredible technical infrastructure, and it enables developers to build their own chains very easily, and sort of spin up their own chains using Cosmos SDK or whatnot. But one of the big issues is the ATOM token itself, and the Cosmos Hub particularly, sort of has an undefined role within the whole ecosystem. And obviously we care a lot about the technology, but at the same time, the token, if there's no value accrual to the token, then theoretically the security of the whole system is sort of in doubt as well. So the token does have some sort of role to play on the technical side, specifically with security. And so it can't just be completely ignored. And so I think one of the big things that everyone's gone so excited about with Cosmos 2.0 is that it more specifically defines the role of ATOM and the Cosmos Hub within the whole ecosystem. And there's a ton of different sort of changes within there. But I'd be curious to hear, sort of as the lead author, specifically on kind of the role of ATOM in this new Cosmos 2.0. How do you guys envision it, and why is it so exciting?
Yeah, I'll back up a little bit and say a word about the role of ATOM to date, and kind of why it kind of has this special status, maybe different from Bitcoin or Ethereum. And the kind of Cosmos philosophy is that there should be horizontal scalability, which really means that you can spin up a new chain, have entire kind of full control over that chain's function, and there's an unlimited amount of block space for that reason. You can just build a new chain and kind of regulate your own gas market. And so really the role that the ATOM has played thus far is kind of a bridge into the ecosystem. It's integrated widely into exchanges. It's a lot of it's how most people got into the Cosmos ecosystem at large, both validators and users or investors. A number of projects have airdropped to the Cosmos Hub. That seems to be a relatively common pattern. And that includes projects like Osmosis, who've really done spectacularly since the initial airdrop. And beyond that, it's basically funded the development of the infrastructure required to deploy the network, and just kind of provided like a coordination point for many of the core developers that are building things like Tendermint, the consensus engine, and Cosmos SDK, the application framework, IBC, etc. So, we shouldn't discount what ATOM has done to date, but you're absolutely right. There is not the same kind of inbuilt value capture mechanism as something like Ethereum, and and that was really kind of like baked in philosophically from day one. The idea was, okay, we're gonna develop something valuable, valuable set of technologies, and then like evaluate the proper way to monetize this, so that we are not extracting rent, and we allow the network to kind of like evolve and grow on its own, kind of driving, being a driving force for that growth rather than an impediment to that growth. So yeah, that's where ATOM 2.0 comes in. And the idea there is to to kind of recognize the role that the hub has played to date and kind of double down on some of those things. So being a kind of gateway for the ecosystem is definitely something that we want to continue. Being a Schelling point for development and core infrastructure, something that we really think is important for the Cosmos Hub. But there's a couple kind of additional features that the ATOM 2.0 construct brings, and that functionality is kind of presumes two features that were already kind of in flight. One is interchain security, which is basically a scaling platform for the Cosmos Hub. It allows other applications to be secured by ATOM, and liquid staking, which allows many of your viewers have probably already heard, but basically solves the kind of dilemma, staker's dilemma, where you either need to stake or use capital in exogenous contexts. So basically, you can stake atoms and get vouchers that can then be used in DeFi or other applications. So those things those features are already kind of in development. And then the ATOM 2.0 kind of functionality is like built on top of that. Maybe I'll pause there just because that was kind of already a lot.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I think the liquid staking is really cool, and I think you guys sort of took a page out of Osmosis's book there. I believe they were the first ones to sort of pioneer this concept. Maybe you guys work together on that. So I think the idea that multiple different Cosmos chains will each have liquid staking, it's kind of crazy in a way. Like, it allows rehypothecation of capital across multiple different use cases, and could lead to sort of a boom in Cosmos DeFi, because I think for the most part, Cosmos hasn't had the same sort of crazy surge, which in DeFi activity, which, to be fair, most of the surges have then been followed by collapses. So it's maybe it's a better approach. I'd be curious though, what are your thoughts on sort of liquid staking in particular, and how that's going to feed into this concept both of Cosmos Hub as a port city, but also just kind of Cosmos's DeFi ecosystem more broadly?
Yeah. So the Cosmos team, which really included Sunny early on, originated the idea of liquid staking. And there were a number of different proposed architectures. So there's a relatively large design space there. I believe that pStake from Persistence was maybe the first to deploy in Cosmos. Didn't get a lot of traction. Osmosis has a very interesting architecture that they call superfluid staking. And the Cosmos Hub is electing to kind of go for a slightly different architecture. And there's some rationale around, why Osmosis went with theirs versus the Cosmos Hub, the kind of Cosmos Hub pattern. The main distinction I would draw there is basically a kind of focus on internal application functionality that Osmosis has, versus the Hub really tries to turn liquid staking into a service itself. So assets can be exported into other chains across IBC. But yeah, to your point, liquid staking is a kind of key ingredient for unlocking cross-chain composability in the ecosystem, because it allows, it basically just improves capital efficiency. So you're not always making this kind of judgment as to, whether you want to get native yields or do functionality on another chain. Use functionality on another chain that's may potentially be yield bearing. So
with just to clarify,
yeah,
with liquid staking, you're like double dipping, right? So you can stake and then rehypothecate into like a liquidity pool on Osmosis or something, or somewhere else, right? So like
yeah,
you could be earning 9% and then another whatever percent doing that as well. And then, but once it's
yes.
once it's like liquid staked, and then also it's been applied to some DeFi use case, it can't be then rehypothecated. Like it's like two for one.
And it could
10 for one.
be.
It could be.
You're
How would
you're
that work?
stacking risk with all of these things, and that's a really the most important kind of security consideration when it comes to liquid staking. But yeah, absolutely, it is possible to issue a liquid staked token, go into an LP pool with that liquid stake token, issue the LP asset, put that into something else. But that's all possible. Is it advisable? I mean, that's not really for me to say. Like, users should really evaluate the kind of layered risk that each of those applications will introduce. Also, one kind of nuanced thing that to recognize about liquid staking is it actually reduces the opportunity cost of staking itself. So yields should decrease a bit as a result of liquid staking, native staking yields.
Yeah, I guess one risk with liquid staking, and I'm not totally sure if it's applicable here, is it creates a little bit more contagion risk where liquid staking assets, if there's some sort of DeFi protocol hack or something, now the security of the chain is sort of directly involved with the native DeFi ecosystem. I'm curious how you guys are thinking about that, and whether there's any mitigations and yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. There's a couple different avenues for mitigation. My preference is basically a diversification of liquid staking options, making sure that there is a competitive market for liquid staked assets. This is challenging because there's real network effects that you're kind of fighting against, but I'm pretty confident that the Cosmos ecosystem is kind of heterogeneous enough that there's going to be interesting use cases for different different kind of architectures. But yes, you're absolutely right. There are real risks that come with liquid staking, and it's going to be a kind of long-term research project and kind of concerted effort by the community to make sure that these are mitigated.
So we recently went through the merge on Ethereum, and like the story there was basically outside of a small group of miners and a handful of people, the entire community was basically on board with this. And so the merge happened, and almost all of the value went to the beacon chain, went to the proof of stake version of Ethereum. With Cosmos and this proposal for ATOM 2.0, it seems like there's a lot more discord or a lot more disagreement exactly about whether this is the right path to move forward. Can you just sort of provide some of the outlines of the argument? Like what are people not happy about with this, or what are some of the differing opinions as it relates to this? Because it would appear to us that the idea of having clear value capture for ATOM while also enhancing these new features like interchain security and liquid staking seems like a good path. But why are there some people, I should say, that don't agree?
Yeah. So I would say that those two features, liquid staking and interchain security, are fairly well recognized and accepted by the community at large. there have been signaling proposals and whatnot on the Cosmos Hub. And but beyond that, there's kind of a heterogeneous set of opinions about what the Cosmos Hub should be doing, what role it should play. If you look back in the original white paper, it says there's a couple kind of hints. There's something about a name service for chains that could maybe do resolution and kind of similar to a DNS. It can kind of like address specific machines in the Cosmos network. There's some mention of routing, but these are all kind of things that were conceived of like before the network existed, and we didn't really understand the utility that was required. So those were kind of just suggestions. And now that we are further down the development path of interchain security and liquid staking, one thing is pretty clear, which is that the primary customer of the Cosmos Hub is going to be other chains. Interchain security kind of puts us, it creates an addressable market for the Cosmos Hub, or commits to a specific addressable market, which is other chains in Cosmos. And so with that lens, this is kind of where these additional features that are proposed in the Cosmos Hub, in the ATOM 2.0 kind of economic loop, come in. And that is the interchain allocator and the interchain scheduler. So the idea there is that, okay, if we want to best serve chains in the Cosmos network, well, what do those chains need? Typically, they need resources to go to market. They need a kind of initial audience, set of users. And they need like some way to kind of coordinate with the larger ecosystem. We actually get a lot of requests at the foundation about kind of how do, I'm a new developer to Cosmos. I'm going to launch my chain relatively soon. I want to like collaborate or partner or something with the Cosmos Hub. And we kind of like don't have a good way to answer that question, or like, there's no collaborative process there, or interface that we have to offer. So the allocator basically solves this problem. It's a way of creating partnerships with the Cosmos Hub, and using ATOM as a to kind of enshrine that partnership. So we can give ATOM liquidity to projects. We can lock up ATOM and do a token swap with other projects. And in that way, we can basically build this set of kind of partnerships and agreements with neighboring chains to their benefit.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be the one thing that I've always sort of found frustrating about the Cosmos world, which is that the tech is amazing. The people are great. But there's, and maybe the fact that there's some level of discord is actually the sign of a healthy ecosystem, but it actually makes it, I think if you're like coming from the outside looking in and looking to develop in this, it's not like there's like a, one team, one dream kind of mentality, which I think is more true in things like Ethereum, for example. And, maybe that's the sign of like maybe some disagreement and consensus, rough consensus versus everyone sort of, blindly following one path is the right sort of approach to these kinds of systems. But I think like if you look at Polygon, for example, or some of these other things where it's just like they have like a marketing effort to like drive adoption, whether it's from crypto developers or like enterprises or fashion labels or all this other stuff. Like they're very focused and have like a very coherent message. So anyway, that's always been my sort of knock on it, and it's succeeded in spite of that, and is still if you look at the value of Cosmos,
in part due to that, I think.
What's that? Yeah, in part due. Yeah, not in spite. Maybe not in spite, but because, right? Like that's what. So I acknowledge that sort of part of it as well. But it would be nice if just for once it was like, hey, there's an Atom 2.0 white paper. Great. And everyone says that's great. Let's do it. Instead, it's like Armageddon, or there's like a there's a big conflict about, is this a good idea? So I don't know. But it goes with the territory. I've come to expect it a little bit from the ecosystem. Adrian, any other sort of final thoughts here?
Oh, I think just
there's actually one. I haven't actually completed this the Atom 2.0. There's one feature that I haven't described yet. So maybe
please do. Yeah,
that's this scheduler component, which is basically a kind of gets to it's an answer to our to where Atom should be kind of positioned with respect to the block space market in the ecosystem, which is basically an elective marketplace for block space futures. So basically, other chains can enter block space into effectively this clearinghouse system, where it will be pooled with the block space from neighboring chains, and there will be batches in which you can purchase block space, simultaneous block space on multiple chains at once. It's entirely up to these sovereign chains to opt into this market, but the idea is that by pulling these into a common market, you can actually create a price premium for block space beyond what any individual chain could offer. And so together, the allocator, which is basically kind of grows up new chains and stimulates cross-chain economic interactions, and the scheduler, which is able to monetize cross-chain economic interactions. This creates a positive feedback loop where build more chains, stimulate more economic activity, monetize that activity, use the revenues to then stimulate more growth. And so this is the kind of core economic loop that is being proposed in Atom 2.0.
Yeah, interesting. We've talked a lot about the war for state and block space, and the idea of a scheduler to make that more orderly and organized, optimizing throughput, I guess, is sort of interesting as a concept. So when does all this happen? Is there a date in the future when Atom 2.0 gets adopted? Is there some catalyst that people can be looking towards? Because I think there are a lot of people who are long assets in the Cosmos ecosystem and would like to know what the roadmap is. What is the next sort of series of events here?
Yeah. So, you mentioned before that there's a little bit of public discord about this stuff, and I've spent a long time trying to understand the kind of psychology of the ecosystem. I don't know if I have all the answers, but I think one of the reasons that there's that you see a lot of this stuff is that it's not happening behind closed doors. I mean, if you look at Polygon, there's a business behind the scenes that's kind of making decisions and deciding things internally, and there's an internal difference of opinion, but when it's presented externally, that's not necessarily the case, and that just is not the case in Cosmos. Everything is kind of we air our dirty laundry basically, and there's real substantive discussion, argument about strategy and what should be, what's the best path forward. It's a little bit messy, but that's kind of our, it's indicative of our commitment to decentralization. There's many teams that have slightly different views on what's best. There's many community members that maybe don't agree on everything.
Yeah.
So
And
there's
really
going to be
care.
kind of a
People really care. I mean, like they really care, you know, and that I think that's a sign of a healthy community as well.
definitely.
Yeah.
So we're going to get some resolution. We've been making a couple kind of tweaks based on community feedback to the original proposal, mainly having to do with kind of oversight of how the funding and development process will go. And there's going to be a proposal on Halloween, October 31st. Hopefully that will go well. And that will give core teams the mandate to work on the things described in the paper. It's going to be a multi-year process. It's going to be deployed in stages. The kind of first effort will really be around capitalizing the project and kind of defining roles, making sure that there's at least a minimal accountability loop that allows community members and core teams to interact in a way that they're both comfortable with. And then, like I said, liquid staking and interchain security are already in progress. Those are planned for early next year. Deployment is planned for early next year. And then this allocator and scheduler portion are really kind of in the research stage. So if we get the green light on those, then that'll, research will continue and development will proceed throughout next year.
All right. Good to know. So we have some things to look forward to. Well, Sam, this has been a really interesting discussion. Covered a lot of ground. I realize I've been at it for about 40 minutes. That's great. So thanks for taking the time. And we will, stay in touch, hopefully, and see what happens over the next little while. Always really interesting to hear what's going on in the Cosmos world. That's it for this week's episode of DeFi Decoded. I'm Alex with Andrew Young and our guest, Sam Hart. Thanks again, Sam. And we will see you next week. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.